Hey everyone, I'm here at PAX East 2015 with the one and only Cliff Bleszinski. How's it going, Cliff?
Man, a little sweaty in here.
Yeah, it is. We're on the Sky Bridge overlooking all of PAX.
Looking Overwatch.
That's right. So you just finished up your panel here at PAX East for Boss Key. And I thought it was really interesting you guys kind of dug into some of the stuff that you're hinting at, not really revealing too much about what you're calling Project Bluestreak right now. But one of the things I want to know, you had some great members of your team up there. What did you tell everybody to have some people move across the whole country to join Boss Key?
Usually I sit them down and I give them kind of the high-level pitch about what I want to do and the vision for what the product is. And I'm pretty good at pitching. And the idea that I have, I think, is pretty darn cool. And I've known a lot of these people for many years, such as Trammell I've known for 20 plus years. And it's 2 degrees of separation between myself, Arjan, Trammell. We can find some really talented people that are willing to move to the up-and-coming area of Raleigh, North Carolina and work on something that they can really actually have an impact on, as opposed to being artist 486 on Assassin's Creed 93 or programmer 5006 on Call of Duty Next Gen, right? So they're really 31 employees right now. Want to get to 60, 70 tops, and I want to know everybody's name and preferably their spouses.
Terrific. So one of the things that I really appreciate as a hardcore FPS player up there, you guys were clearly passionate about player movement. And while we're still waiting to learn about what the exact details of how you're going to express that are, can you kind of dig into why you think movement is maybe an underappreciated aspect of FPSs?
I mean, when you're playing an FPS, you're not just using the mouse. The 50% of it is the keyboard that you're using to dodge, to jump, to leap, to flow through the world. And previously working on the Gears of War franchises, it was stop and pop, and that was cool. But there's something about an FPS where you see the kind of down the barrel of the gun, and you have the right FOV, and you want to just flow seamlessly through the world and not get stuck on anything. One thing about movement is, if we have some sort of mantling or some sort of other moves like that, I don't want to interrupt the player's gun. I want you to always be able to shoot and not really do the whole on the ledge and things like that. Get the right FOV, get the right acceleration. And honestly, the game that we're building right now is extremely vertical, extremely fast-paced, and I think we're actually gonna have a hard time if we ever port it to consoles because it's so crazy right now.
Yeah, one of the things you guys were emphasizing up there is that you're not even thinking necessarily right now about minimum spec for the game, that you're very focused on delivering the best looking experience, the best performance in the game right now.
Yeah, we want to get high frame rate, but extremely good looking. And also Unreal Engine 4 today showed a little bit of footage of environments from the game and the experience. And frame rate is king, but I want they come for the graphics and they stay for the gameplay. And we really need to make sure we run in a potato. But that said, if you have a high-end rig, this thing needs to look good.
Yeah, definitely. So what makes Boss Key different, maybe in terms of culture or your approach from other studios you've worked at?
Well, we have good communication, but we barely have any meetings. We don't even have like a proper meeting space. We have like a sofa and a console and TVs and things like that and futons. And it's one of those things that, I don't want to say, it's like a frat team because it's not, or frat house or anything like that. It's nothing like that. What it is, it has that feeling of a small team that feels like family. Where everybody tracks everybody and makes sure everyone kicks butt. We support each other, and we're kind of the rebels against kind of like the standard kind of corporate way to make games.
So you're a VR connoisseur. You mentioned it there during your panel, and you recently, during GDC earlier this week, you got a chance to try Steam VR, and you called on Twitter a religious experience. Yeah. Can you talk about, what is it about Steam VR that produced that in you?
Well, I can't go back now. I saw the Crescent Bay demo from Oculus, and it's fantastic. But when you can sit there in VR and you can actually move around something and then reach down with the controller and pick it up and throw it at something else and interact with it, honestly, my wife feels the same way. We felt like we went somewhere, and the Steam VR felt for me like the first time I've ever went to Disneyland. It was a transcendent, magical experience. I want it in my damn home. I'm not ready to develop for it yet. We're still making our PC first-person shooter. I still think VR from being in everybody's living room is still a year minimum, maybe 2 years out. But I already have an idea for a game I'd want to do for it eventually. So the Valve stuff is magic, and I want to get a dev kit ASAP.
Do you have any thoughts specifically about how you expect VR to change FPSs? I think, one of the things I'm cautious about is just head tracking in general. I almost want a fixed perspective.
Well, the biggest mistake that some people made, even over at Oculus, was putting Team Fortress 2 on the Oculus, right? The second you move your view and it's not your own head turning it, that's when the motion sickness kicks in. That's when you're like, God, I'm getting warm. What's happening? And then you're done for the day. So the kind of experience I think that is going to be made for VR is going to be much like Bungie changing the pacing of Halo for a console controller. It's going to need to be a very different paced game, very, initially on rails probably, but I mean, from playing the Sony Morpheus demo, kind of like Guy Ritchie short, The Heist, I mean, I could see how, you know, you can still do some really good first-person shooter experience in that with your hands.
So I'm curious how you see the business of VR playing out, you know, as someone who's literally invested in Oculus. Do you think it's eventually going to become a winner-take-all space? Do we need a standardized VR platform eventually?
I mean, you can't really standardize it because there's just several horses in the race. And, you know, like I said in the panel, you know, when capitalism works is when you have competition. And, you know, I like that there's 3 horses in the race now. They're going to keep each other honest. They're going to really try and make a fantastic VR experience. And my concern with VR has always been the Me Too shitty VR that's going to make, you know, it harder for the guys who are doing legit VR to actually do it. So somebody gets a cheap experience, they get a bad experience, they get sick, and they never wanted to use it again. Because that's, you know, the difference between good VR being and actually working, being amazing, and getting sick, it's very subtle nudges, and it's really easy to screw that up, and that's what really concerns me.
What would you say are the most exciting or interesting VR experiences to you right now?
Honestly, it's the Valve stuff. Like, I don't know if you've read the articles, I don't know if you want to spoil it, but they end it with some Portal fan service, and when Atlas comes into the room damaged and you pull open his chest and all of his robot guts are strewn out in front of you 6 feet and you're rotating his parts around and the clock's counting down and then GLaDOS comes out and the floor goes out from underneath you, I was just like, I came out of it like, everybody who came out of it had that look in their face. It was absolutely amazing, and you know, the setup is clunky, having to put, you know, lasers up and having to put a belt on and everything, but it's worth it.
Yeah, a lot of people were wondering whether that was sort of a teaser for Portal 3 potentially, but unfortunately that's not the case.
Who knows what Valve is going to do, man? You know, they make enough money that they can afford to dabble, they can afford to take their time. I just, you know, I want this to actually ship, you know, and I think them partnering with HTC is a very good choice.
So getting back to FPSs a little bit, what would you say are the things that have sort of changed in terms of players' expectations since, say, the late 90s to now?
Well, I mean, you know, things like reloading, iron sights, you know, they're not necessarily bad things. They're in there for a reason. And, you know, we'll have reloading, we'll have a couple guns will have iron sights, but, you know, we'll have alt fires, things like that. But, you know, players expect, you know, a game to last 30, you know, months. You know, they expect it to be a serious, deep experience that goes on for multiple years. And the difference between back then is you release the game, maybe release some map packs. Now you're constantly doing updates. You're constantly fixing, tuning, tweaking, introducing new weapons on a regular basis. Now it used to be fire and forget. Now it's truly a game as a service with constant updates.
So in the show us your rig column that you wrote for us a couple months ago, you mentioned, you know, Counter-Strike is something, CSGO is something that you're playing pretty frequently. What is it that you think is it? You know, what is it about Counter-Strike that makes it so immortal? It has it holding up for this long, you know, despite, you know, pretty minimal updates, I think, on Valve's part.
Well, Counter-Strike is still one of the most airtight FPSs I've ever played, especially with Go. Not only the weapons, not only the movement and the feel, but the game type itself of, you know, bomb defusal. It's last man standing, but there's something that could force somebody's hand to prevent it from being last man camping. And that in and of itself creates a massive amount of beautiful tension in the game where you can be clutch or ace and just take out everybody, or, you know, be the last guy alive. It's dodgeball with guns, and it still is airtight as hell.
That's a good way of putting it. So, you know, one of the other things that you really emphasized in your panel was community. That seems very important to you, the Bosky and Project Bluestreak. Can you kind of hint at how that's going to be implemented, you know, what your approach is going to be to community that differs from other studios, perhaps?
I mean, there are others that do it right, you know, like the League community, like I'm envious of that. So the key is to do it from day one. You know, we're doing our live streams, you know, we're getting a little bit of traction, but we want to be that kind of game where suddenly everyone's like, wow, they have a big following. Where did that come from? Just like it actually happened with League, where suddenly you show up and you're having people, you know, at shows like this lining up for hours or days just to get a, you know, a custom skin. So we live in a world where there's 8 million things to, you know, entertain you. You need to maintain your community and keep them happy and reward them, especially reward the earliest of the earliest adopters. So, you know, the people who, you know, sign up on our email list, they're going to get something special when the game actually launches, things like that.
All right, and finally, when can we expect to hear more about Project Bluestreak, including its real name?
We're looking toward about midsummer is when we're looking to hopefully announce the name, branding, as well as a little bit more information about what the gameplay is.
Well, thanks for talking with us, Cliff.
Thanks for having me. Thanks for the party last night, too.
Oh, that was fun. Yeah, thanks for being there.
A little too much fun.
All right, before I let you go, we're giving away a cool ASUS laptop. It's one of our lucky viewers here. As a part of our PAX coverage, I'd like to have you sign that wherever you'd like. All right, thanks, Cliff.